Godzilla is a fictional monster or kaiju. In Toho, the character debuted in the eponymous 1954 film directed and co-written by Ishiro Honda. Gojira is a portmanteau of the Japanese words Gojira and Kujira, owing to the fact that in one planning stage, Godzilla was described as a cross between a gorilla and whale. Within the context of the Japanese films, Godzilla's exact origins vary, but it is generally depicted as an enormous, violent, prehistoric sea monster awakened and empowered by nuclear radiation. King Kong vs. Godzilla. 1962. King Kong vs. Godzilla had its roots in an earlier concept for a new King Kong feature developed by Willis O'Brien, animator of the original stop-motion Kong. Around 1960, O'Brien came up with a proposed treatment, King Kong meets Frankenstein, where Kong would fight against a giant Frankenstein monster in San Francisco. Many issues later they decided to replace the giant Frankenstein monster with Godzilla to be King Kong's opponent and would have Shinichi Sekizawa rewrite Yate's script. Mothra vs. Godzilla. 1994. This is the third film in the Godzilla franchise. In the film, humans beseech the aid of the insect god Mothra to stop Godzilla from destroying Japan. Due to the success of Mothra 1061 and King Kong vs. Godzilla 1962, Toho chose to pair Godzilla against Mothra for the following film. The film was intended for children as well as adults as a what to complete with television's growing popularity in Japan. Godzilla vs. the Sea Monster. 1966. In other name Ebirah, Horror of the Deep. During its development, Ebirah, Horror of the Deep was intended to feature King Kong, but the character was replaced by Godzilla. The underwater sequences were filmed on an indoor soundstage where the Godzilla and Ebirah suits were filmed through the glass of a water-filled aquarium, with some scenes of the Godzilla suit shot separately underwater as well. Son of Godzilla. 1967. For the second Godzilla film in a row, Toho produced an island-themed adventure with a smaller budget than most of their monster films from this time period. The filming took place in Guam and areas in Japan including Gotemba. Toho wanted to create a baby Godzilla to appeal to the date crowd with the idea that girls would like a cute baby monster. Godzilla vs. Hedorah. 1971. Godzilla vs. Hedorah features an environmentalist message, with the malevolent Hedorah being spawned from pollution. The microscopic alien form Hedorah feeds on Earth's pollution and grows into a poisonous acid-secreting sea monster. Godzilla vs. Gigan. 1972. Disappointed with the critical and commercial reception of Godzilla vs. Hedorah, 1971, Tomoyuki Tanaka immediately began thinking about how to take Godzilla back to the golden era of the 1960s. Tanaka thought to reinvigorate Godzilla was not to try new things but bring back fan-favorite villain King Ghidorah. This was Haruo Nakajima's final time playing Godzilla, a role he had played since 1954. Terror of Mechagodzilla. 1975. The original concept is similar to the finished version of Terror of Mechagodzilla, with many of the changes being budgetary in nature. The most obvious alteration is the removal of the two dinosaurs called the Titans, which merged to become Titanosaurus in the first draft. This film is one of two Godzilla films with brief nudity. The scene occurs when Katsura undergoes an operation to have Mechagodzilla II's control device placed inside her body, at which point her breasts are exposed. While she was portrayed by a mannequin in the scene. The Return of Godzilla. 1984. After the box office failure of Terror of Mechagodzilla, Toho attempted to reinvigorate the franchise several times during the late 1970s and early 1980s. The first attempt was the announcement of a color remake of the original 1954 film entitled The Rebirth of Godzilla in 1977, but the project was shelved. Godzilla series creator Tomoyuki Tanaka reviving the franchise in 1979 Godzilla's 25th anniversary, intending to return the series to its dark anti-nuclear route in the wake of the 3 Mile Island accident. Godzilla vs. Biollante. 1989. In the film, corporations struggle for control over samples of Godzilla's cells, while the monster itself battles a creature born from a combination of Godzilla's cells, the cells of a plant, and the cells of a woman. The idea originated from a public storywriting contest, and set a trend common to all Heisei-era movies, in which Godzilla faces off against opponents capable of metamorphosing into new, progressively more powerful forms. Godzilla vs. King Ghidorah. 1991. Although the previous film Godzilla vs. Biollante has been the most expensive Godzilla film produced at the time, for its low audience attendance and loss of revenue convinced Tomoyuki Tanaka to revitalize the series by bringing back iconic monsters from pre-1984 Godzilla movies. Godzilla vs. Mothra. 1992. The idea of shooting a movie featuring a revamped Mothra dated back to a screenplay written in 1990 by Kazuki Amori entitled Mothra vs. Gigan. After the success of Godzilla vs. King Ghidorah, the polls demonstrated that Mothra was more popular with women who comprised the majority of Japan's population. Godzilla vs. Mechagodzilla II. 1993. The fifth film in the Heisei series of Godzilla movies was originally meant to be the last in order to avoid competing with upcoming TriStar American Godzilla reboot film and to honor the recent passing of Ishiro Honda. The plot would have involved Mikami Kong's sporting syringes containing G-Force Special Forces which would have been injected into Godzilla's bloodstream in a manner similar to Fantastic Voyage. Godzilla vs. SpaceGodzilla. 1994. The idea of SpaceGodzilla was first conceived in 1978 and was designed as a homepage to the monster's hinted progenitor Biollante by incorporating tusks and a hissing roar reminiscent of the latter monster. Godzilla vs. Destoroyah. 1995. Godzilla vs. Destoroyah received global publicity following an announcement by Toho that the film would feature the death of Godzilla. 5 days prior to the film's release, a large bronze sculpture of Godzilla was erected on the Hibiya Cinema District. After the film's release, Toho Studios was bombarded by letters of protest demanding Godzilla's resurrection. Godzilla. 1998. Godzilla is a 1998 American monster film directed and co-written by Roland Emmerich. It is a reboot of Toho Company. Interested, Woods and Fried proposed the idea to Columbia Pictures, but were initially rejected. Woods stated, "We pitched the idea to Columbia and they passed outright. Their response was they felt it had the potential for camp." Godzilla 2000 Millennium. 1999. Due to high demand from fans to revive the Toho Godzilla, development began on a new Toho production 2 months after the release of TriStar's Godzilla. Regarding Godzilla's design, director Takao Okawara wanted to make something new, and noted that Godzilla's height has changed over the years, stating they reduced its height back to something closer to the original at approximately 170 feet. Godzilla vs. Megaguirus. 2000. The film was released directly to television in the United States by Columbia TriStar with an English dub. The film has been released at least twice on home media. The first was by Columbia/TriStar Home Entertainment. Godzilla against Mechagodzilla. 2002. Following the successful revival of the monsters Mothra and King Ghidorah the previous year, Toho elected to bring back Mechagodzilla for the next installment in the Godzilla franchise. Unlike previous iterations of Mechagodzilla, this version is mostly referred to by the name Kiryu throughout the film. Japanese baseball star Hideki Matsui has a cameo as himself in the film, due to his nickname, Godzilla. Godzilla Tokyo S.O.S. 2003. Toho had commissioned 4 story outlines for director Tezuka to choose from. Tezuka found them all boring, so instead he wrote a new story outline overnight and submitted it to the studio, which they eventually approved. Godzilla Final Wars 2004. Ryuhei Kitamura accepted the offer to direct the film due to being unsatisfied with the Godzilla films of the 1980s, 1990s, and 2000s, stating, "I loved the Godzilla movies back in the 70s, but not so much the ones released in the 1980s and 90s." Kitamura has compared Godzilla Final Wars to that of a musician's best of album. Like previous Godzilla films, Godzilla Final Wars makes extensive use of practical effects rather than CGI. Godzilla 2014. The project began as an IMAX short film in 2004 but was transferred to Legendary in 2009 to be redeveloped as a feature film. The film was officially announced in March 2010, ABD released on May 2014. The film was a box office success, grossing $529 million worldwide against a production budget of $160 million. Shin Godzilla 2016. Toho announced plans for a new Godzilla film for a 2016 release, stating, "This is very good timing after the success of the American version this year, if not now, then when?" The new film would have no ties to Legendary's Monsterverse and would serve as a reboot to Toho's series. Godzilla King of the Monsters 2019. American monster film directed and co-written by Michael Dougherty. The sequel was greenlit during the opening weekend of Godzilla, with Gareth Edwards expected to return to direct a trilogy. Godzilla vs. Kong 2021. The project was announced in October 2015 when Legendary Pictures declared plans for a shared cinematic universe between Godzilla and King Kong. After being delayed from a November 2020 release date due to the COVID-19 pandemic, Godzilla vs. Kong was theatrically released internationally on March 24, 2021. Wingard prepared by watching every Godzilla and King Kong film. Before receiving a script, Wingard had already pictured the final battle taking place in a synthwave-style futuristic city backdrop. Wingard cited the 1976 remake of King Kong and Godzilla vs. Destoroyah as touchstones for evoking empathy in the film.